Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, playground and home to the wealthy.
It is an affluent community. We enjoy a phenomenal quality of life here.
But wealthy people don't always manage their own money.
Tonight, it's a block party for wealthy friends and a stranger in their midst. For one person, this is going to be their very last party.
Brittany had been preparing for a court case. She would not have missed this court date for nothing.
If Brittany was in dire need of a protection order, why would she miss the court date?
Something was out of the ordinary here. Something wasn't correct, and she hadn't been seen or heard from by anyone.
Now, things start to kick in that something has gone wrong. And by this time, someone has to start thinking that the party she was seen at was her last.
It's a dream for most people to live in a true beach community. The sand, the surf, and the sunshine. Ponte Vedra Beach is a wealthy, unincorporated seaside community and a suburb of Jacksonville, Florida, in St. Johns County. The county seat and largest incorporated city is St. Augustine.
St. Augustine is the nation's oldest city. We enjoy a phenomenal quality of life here.
Among the residents of St. Augustine is 45-year-old Brittany Tavar.
Brittany Tavar has tried many careers over the course of her life. Waitressing, real estate, even tried to be an actress in Hollywood. But it's family money that buys her her large home.
Brittany lived in a beach community, a seaside community north of the city of St. Augustine in an area we call South Ponte Vedra Beach. So it is an affluent community. Brittany was a kind person, an outgoing person, engaged in her neighborhood, engaged in the community, and well respected amongst her friend group.
With Brittany being popular and very social, she always has many events. And now with the 4th of July looming, of course she has somewhere to go.
Tonight, it's a block party for wealthy friends.
Her neighborhood sponsored a block party style event where neighbors came together for Independence Day or 4th of July.
Brittany Tavar brings Joe, a young man she recently met, who now rents a room in her home.
Joe was invited to this by Brittany, so neighbors were able to interact with him and meet him, and multiple pictures were taken during this party.
Joe seems like the perfect lodger. Young, handsome, a student with computer skills, he's able to help Brittany with her project.
Not only is Joe taking up space in her home, Brittany soon begins spending money on him to support his interests.
Brittany had bought Joseph a computer to help with her business, to build a website.
Joe is also helping her prepare for her court case in the morning.
The next day, Brittany Tavar is expected in court, where she's hoping to bring a repeat violence injunction against Ann Liddon, a former friend and neighbor. They have an ongoing dispute.
Brittany had been preparing for a court case that meant a lot to her. She had gotten into a confrontation with a neighbor of hers at a beach club. And this was the final injunction hearing to make it permanent. And she had been preparing for this case. She would not have missed this court date for nothing, because it was that important to her.
She and Joe leave the party pretty early, around 9 p.m. No doubt she wanted to be fresh for her court case in the morning. On the way home, she fills up her car with gasoline.
Despite all the preparation and the concern by Brittany for this court date, she does not show up for the court appearance, which causes great concern amongst her friends.
When Brittany's best friend Brenda discovers that she has missed her court hearing, Brenda immediately calls Brittany's family, who are spread out across the country.
Because Brittany had quite regular contact with her family, they're spread across the United States, and they knew about the pending court case. When they never heard from her, they called her friend to go to the residence and check and see if anything was wrong. She attends the residence, and there is no sign of forced entry, no signs of foul play, but no sign of Brittany, which causes her concern, and she notifies the police that something is amiss.
So one of our deputies had taken an initial report that was a check on welfare, and he did an informational report on it, which came across our desk, gave us a call and let us know about it. He did a cursory check of the house and didn't see anything suspicious. But Brenda Henry was very concerned. She normally would hear from her friend, and she had been making phone calls numerous times to Brittany and didn't hear back from her.
Brittany's sister consults with a police officer friend who instructs her to call a locksmith. Tavar's friends gain access to her home. Once inside her residence, some unusual details emerge.
The glass sliding door was left cracked open with a stick so it couldn't be slid any further open because she had cats that would come and go. But nothing out of order that would say that there was a murder that took place.
But the fact that she would leave the door open and not protect her cats would be a concern to her friends who know how she loved her animals. This would not be an overly big concern to the investigating officer, but her friends know she would never do that.
There are some small details that people probably wouldn't notice unless they knew Brittany well. For one, her air conditioner was on, and that was weird because she always turned it off when she left. And two, her 2 Bichon Frise dogs were missing. Apart from that, nothing was wrong except for a strong smell of bleach.
We learned that these dogs that Brittany had, she never left the house without these animals. Something was out of the ordinary here. Something wasn't correct. And she hadn't been seen or heard from by anyone. She took those animals with her everywhere she went, and she would never leave the pups unattended.
It's likely wherever the dogs are, that's where Brittany Tavar is.
But in our line of work, it's not uncommon for adults to go on an unexpected vacation or unexpectedly be stressed out and take a few days and just not tell anyone. So we're not necessarily that concerned right off the bat in those cases. Our patrol officers put out what we call an attempt to locate. So basically that just means it's a regional broadcast to other law enforcement in the area that friends and family of this individual are looking for her. So if law enforcement comes in contact with her, a traffic stop or any other situation, they just basically inform her, hey, your friends are looking for you or your family's looking for you.
Which makes what happens next so disturbing. It's 2 days after Brittany's disappearance that the first clues as to what happened to her begin to emerge. Kubert, one of Brittany Tavar's 2 Bichon Frise dogs, is found about 300 miles from home in Hopkins, South Carolina.
An individual saw the dogs on the roadside near a fire station. but was only able to get Cougar, and took the animal to Battle Veterinarian up in South Carolina, I believe it was Richmond, South Carolina, and found that the dog had a microchip. The veterinarian contacted Antigua veterinarian here, trying to locate Brittany, and they couldn't get an answer at Brittany's number. So to find one of her animals on the roadside in South Carolina was something that was greatly out of the ordinary that Brittany would have done. She kept those dogs groomed and cleaned all the time, and you could tell the dog had been running loose.
Now things start to kick in that something has gone wrong. One dog, no Brittany, no car, no idea what's occurred. So now the police would kick up their investigation, ramp it up a little more.
So then we knew that we had something here that definitely warranted a further look from law enforcement.
Brittany was in a stressful situation with her neighbor, and she did have the money to pack up and leave. But those dogs were like family to her. She never would have left them anywhere.
Friends and family's instincts are always right. The party she was seen at was her last, and they knew it.
Brittany Tavar attends a block party the night before she's to go to court to get a protection order against a neighbor. The next day, she goes missing.
She would not have missed this court date for nothing, because it was that important to her.
When one of her beloved dogs shows up as a stray in a different state, police take notice.
To find one of her animals on the roadside in South Carolina was something that was greatly out of the ordinary that Brittany would have done. She kept those dogs groomed and cleaned all the time, and you could tell the dog had been running loose.
Now things start to kick in that something has gone wrong. One dog, no Brittany, no car, no idea what's occurred.
So then we knew that we had something here that definitely warranted a further look from law enforcement.
Who is the missing woman, Brittany Tavar? Brittany Tavar is born Susan Janet Bellama.
She had lived out in California at one point, and she was married to Tavar out in California, and that's where she changed her name.
The marriage ends, but she keeps the last name.
In her 30s, she decides to go by the name Brittany and even changes her age.
She's an attractive woman who is constantly reinventing herself.
She was older than what her driver's license said here in the state of Florida. She was actually born in 1958, and her driver's license, I believe, says she was born in 1965.
Brittany Tavar lives in a beach house her parents bought her in 1999 through a trust fund.
Brittany's brother Andrew has sole control over the trust fund set up by her father based on her financial irresponsibility.
She enjoys membership at an oceanside beach club.
Brittany was a kind person, an outgoing person, engaged in her neighborhood, engaged in the community, and well respected amongst her friend group. Primary things that we learned about Brittany was that she was very interested in helping people that were down in their luck.
Brittany was financially well off. She received money each month, and because of that, I think she was in a position to help people out in the community. So she would bring people to her house and let them do work around the house, could have gave them a place to sleep.
When the police discover that she has had 8 homeless people stay with her over the last period of time, it causes a lot more concern, because now you have a list of transient suspects who could possibly have done something to her in some way, shape, or form. Kidnapped her, forced her to take them somewhere, which would explain why Cougar was found in South Carolina, because transient people tend to roam from state to state to state. They're homeless. and they also sometimes are criminals. Brittany's family hire a private investigator to dig deeper into this mystery, and he uncovers the details about the homeless people, the dog. All of this is now brought to the police by this private investigator.
A private investigator contacted us. I went and met him out there along with Detective George Harrigan and Detective Gene Tolbert. And he had a key to the house to let us in. So we did an inside cursory check of the house, and everything looked normal. Nothing was out of place.
At this point, there still is the possibility that Brittany is alive, well, and she is doing this on her own.
He brought all these concerns to us, which alerted us a little bit more to see if there's something else to the case. And that's when we started digging in.
Once they see the compilation that he has put together, they now realize maybe they have to take a look at something bigger. This was under their nose for the whole time, but the private investigator seems to be the one that put the glue together to tie it all in.
Brenda Henry was Brittany's best friend, as Brenda described to us. She helped us in the case and giving us information.
Brenda Henry tells police about the neighbor that Brittany feared, Ann Lydon.
Brittany was neighbors with Ann Lydon. They had quite a bit in common. They both bred their dogs and sold their puppies. They would often go on walks together and sometimes meet up for coffee dates.
But when Tavar dates one of Lydon's friends and the romance ends, so does the women's friendship.
Ann and her husband go to Brittany's to pick up her ex's things. She refuses to let them in, but they come in anyway.
Tavar hits Lydon in the head with a wine bottle. Lydon also alleges Tavar tries to strangle her.
And Brittany was subsequently charged with assault and battery and had to do probation and community service and stay away from this friend, which ended that friendship.
But the conflict escalates when Lydon and her husband join Tavar's beach club. Tavar claims Lydon keys her car.
She was a very strong-willed individual, and I believe that's why her and the neighbor had an incident at the beach club.
Over time, Brittany now has started to carry a video camera to record this friend and her various stages of harassment. And she's recording the video to take to this court date for evidence to get the restraining order.
The lady she had the incident with threw her camera into the pool, which upset Brittany. We touched base with her to find out what their connection was.
Brittany's friend Ann is interviewed by the police and asked about her whereabouts, what she was doing on the days when Brittany disappears. She says she has no knowledge. She believes it's a hoax that Brittany is taking out on her to create more animosity towards her. And the police ask her to submit to a polygraph, which she refuses to do so.
Brittany's second dog, Huey, is also found in Hopkins, South Carolina. At request of the detectives, both dogs are swabbed for blood stains.
The private investigator has found photos from the block party of Brittany with a companion. And they also, by this time, have now found the second dog in South Carolina. So he's bringing more and more items to the party, so to speak, for the police to look at. And now they have someone with her the night before she disappeared, which is now another person of interest.
With the photograph that we received, Detective George Harrigan got into our network system, and he was able to find a picture of Joseph Roberts inside of our system and put the pictures together, and we came up with a name and date of birth. Something was out of the ordinary here. Something wasn't correct, and she hadn't been seen or heard from by anyone. So all the answers at this point lied with Joseph Roberts. So we had to make contact and find him.
We know who he is. So we did everything we possibly could to look at historical interactions with law enforcement during this trek across the country that Joseph Roberts would have been on.
And we found that there was a traffic stop that was conducted in Wyoming on Joseph Roberts. And during that traffic stop, there was no one else in the vehicle with him. And he said it was his aunt's vehicle that he was in possession and that they were in town visiting others.
At the time, it seems innocent, and Joe was let off with a warning. But now, the incident takes on an ominous tone.
Brittany Tavar is entered into the National Crime Information Center as missing endangered. Brittany's neighbors are interviewed about Joe.
From talking to people that had interacted with him at this party or just people that had known him in the community during a short period of time he was here, was that he was somewhat of a drifter, was kind of down on his luck, and was just a young kid trying to find his way.
Detectives aren't sure if a crime has been committed or not at this point. Brittany's credit cards are active, and they have no idea who's using them.
We were very interested in those credit card transactions because along with credit card transactions at most places comes video surveillance. So we were able to obtain video surveillance in many, if not all of those locations.
While examining the security footage, detectives see Joseph Roberts entering a store and purchasing a few items with Brittany's card. While watching the clip, they notice something unusual.
What we learned was we did not see Brittany in any of those video transactions.
Now you have even more to go on that something has happened to Brittany. He has taken her credit cards. He's using them. He's on camera. He was in her home with her. He's been seen with her prior to her demise. You now have a reason to start issuing bulletins to track him down and find about his whereabouts, to interview him and find out what he knows about the disappearance of Brittany. And by this time, someone has to start thinking that there is more to this than a missing person.
We start tracing those finances all the way to Portland, Oregon, and he purchased a bunch of camping equipment.
So we were very concerned with the close proximity to Canada in the Pacific Northwest that he was going to get off the grid and try to make his way to the border. So once we knew her vehicle was gone, someone else was driving it, we utilized that power of attorney and that brother to say this is a stolen vehicle. So we were able to get a nationwide arrest warrant for grand theft auto, basically, and that's how we initiated a case alongside the U.S. Marshal Service.
While they wait for more information on this missing persons case, detectives visit Brittany's home to find clues on what could have possibly happened to Brittany.
We did a full-scale search of the house, which included crime scene technicians. Minor amounts of blood were discovered in the house that were not necessarily very visible.
From August 9th to the 15th, officers conduct media interviews and share information across multiple states.
Part of the investigative strategy we had at one point was, let's try to get as much media attention to this case as we can in the Pacific Northwest. We're in Florida, we believe he's in the Pacific Northwest. We were concerned without attention drawn to the case that he was going to get off the grid and be gone forever. So my partner and I were able to get out to the Pacific Northwest. We got on many news outlets in Boise, in Seattle, and in Portland as much as we possibly could to gain attention to the case.
Detective George Harrigan and I, we flew out to Portland, Oregon, and started meeting with other network news crews out there to try to draw attention to the case and see if anyone have seen him.
The family offers a $25,000 reward for any information on her whereabouts.
We had a manhunt on all over the Pacific Northwest.
3 months after Brittany's disappearance, there's a break in the case.
After our visit to the Pacific Northwest, Detective Harrigan and I came back to Florida. And a few days later, he got arrested for shoplifting up in Seattle. And the Seattle Police Department notified us, and they held him until we got up there and arrested him on the grand theft charge of the automobile.
My partner and I flew to Seattle immediately, and we were provided an interview room and access to him at Seattle Police Department headquarters, where we conducted a several-hour interview with him.
Now that Joe is in custody, detectives need to get him to talk in the hopes of finding Brittany. Brittany Tavar is trying to get a protection order against a Florida neighbor when she goes missing.
She would not have missed this court date for nothing because it was that important to her.
When her beloved dogs turn up stray on the streets of Hopkins, South Carolina, family know something is very wrong.
She did not show up for this all-important court date. Her animals have been not cared for in the way that she does.
Something was out of the ordinary here. Something wasn't correct, and she hadn't been seen or heard from by anyone.
The private investigator found photos from the block party of Brittany with a companion. And now they have someone with her the night before she disappeared, which is now another person of interest.
So all the answers at this point lied with Joseph Roberts. So we had to make contact and find him.
Brittany's new friend Joe is tracked driving her vehicle across country.
Detectives aren't sure if a crime has been committed or not at this point. Brittany's credit cards are active and they have no idea who's using them.
We were very interested in those credit card transactions because along with credit card transactions at most places comes video surveillance.
While examining the security footage, detectives see Joseph Roberts entering a store and purchasing a few items with Brittany's card.
What we learned was we did not see Brittany in any of those video transactions.
Now you have even more to go on that something has happened to Brittany. He has taken her credit cards. He's using them. He's on camera.
We start tracing those finances all the way to Portland, Oregon. After our visit to the Pacific Northwest, Detective Harrigan and I came back to Florida, and a few days later, he got arrested for shoplifting up in Seattle. And they held him until we got up there.
After a 3-month hunt for answers, detectives sit down to interview Joseph Roberts.
We don't go straight into, the crime and why we're there. We basically went there to talk about her cards being used across the country and her vehicle that he wasn't supposed to have access to. And that leads into certain aspects about this case that were concerning.
When you're conducting an interview with people, you've got to be very patient and persistent and hope that the guilt that they're feeling, that they're just willing to open up at one point and just let you know what actually happened. We built a rapport with Joseph. We were just talking to him about his time in Florida and what he did while he was here, and trying to get a little bit of a background on where he came from, what type of kid he was, and he kind of opened up in that area. As soon as we started getting into where Brittany was, he started clamming up and didn't want to answer that information because we started asking him, okay, well, where's Brittany? You have her car, you've been using her finances.
He wasn't forthcoming in the beginning. He was very concerned and purposely slowed the interview and gave us a little information at a time.
So as you build their trust and you talk to them, you help them release the guilt that they're feeling inside and convince them that if you tell us, we can help you. When you're talking to people and you're releasing that information, what a weight it takes off your shoulders. I mean, if you think he's got to keep all that information inside, he's got to be so anxious to get that off of his chest and tell somebody, and we know that. So it's just being patient, treating him with kindness until he breaks loose and gives us that information.
But there was a turning point where I think he began to realize that the best thing for him to do was to tell the truth, and that's what he ended up doing ultimately.
He has two requests. He wishes to have a cigarette and to be placed in a secure jail facility because he fears for his life.
During that interview, Joseph confessed to us that he did murder Brittany Tavar based on an altercation they had the morning of this incident.
But sometimes confessions are not enough. There always has to be evidence, whether it's circumstantial or prime evidence, to convict someone without a lengthy, complex trial.
We didn't have the body yet. The amount of blood that we had found in the house wasn't really significant. It wasn't a strong case. We had a missing person. We had him using the car, using the finances, but it was a weak case.
They have no idea where the body is at this point in time. Strangely enough, he cooperates fully. He gives them a detailed map to an area, a road called 207 in a wooded area, and draws a map pinpointing her body. The police go to this area and find what they believe to be her human remains at this point in time, based on the evidence that he gave them in his confession. It's more complex than one would assume, and hard for the public to understand that this just isn't as simple as 1, 2, 3. There's a lot of things to have to add together to make this case work.
Joseph Roberts is born on April 2nd, 1984.
He was blonde, blue-eyed. We were told that he was charming and that he was an outgoing individual. And we were also told that he had some mental health issues and that he had anger issues as well. And also, he might have been treating some of those issues with the use of marijuana. We made contact with his aunt who lives up in Indiana. That's where Joseph was actually raised at.
He works at a gas station. Known as a nice person, he's up front with his manager and reveals that he deals with depression and angry outbursts, and that he lives in his car.
His manager rents him a room at her house, and everything went well until he stopped bathing, stopped cleaning his room, and started doing drugs. That was the last straw.
A month later, he is fired from the gas station for stealing. But not before he charms yet another employee.
One of his co-workers feels sympathy or sorrow or empathy for him and asks him to sleep on the couch in her home if he'll babysit her 3 children.
It isn't long before he charms another employee. She takes him in, but the pattern continues. Once again, he stops bathing, stops cleaning his room, and starts doing drugs. It turns out that his aunt has suffered from the same problem with him.
She had sent him to a school out in California, a computer school, and he had gotten in trouble at that school and had moved back to Indiana, and they had a falling out. And at that point, he became a drifter because she kicked him out. He took his car and he drove down here to the state of Florida where he was just drifting.
He's come to a low point. He seems to have ran out of women to use. He's homeless, living in the woods, but then he meets Brittany.
Brittany and Joseph had met at a local bookstore in town. They had started a conversation, I believe, over a period of a few days, and there was conversation about Joseph's skill set in electronics and computer technology, and Brittany recruited him to do some computer work for her in the near future.
Brittany and Joe only knew each other for 2 weeks.
It was not uncommon for her to run into someone at a bookstore, at a coffee shop, and want to talk to them, want to help them, want to offer them a place to stay for a little bit while they got on their feet, and things of that nature.
For Brittany, there's an opportunity here. He has some computer skills, and she is building a court case for the restraining order against her former friend. Also, she wishes to start a business, and here's a chance to help a person who's been down and out. He's got computer skills. He can help build a package for the business on the computer. So there is a great potential here for him and her to work together. So you can see the good side of the story up until it goes south.
Roberts had given us a very detailed instruction on how to get to the remains, and our team back in St. Johns County literally followed his instructions and immediately found her remains. Roberts explained to us that he brought a shovel with him and attempted to bury the remains, but due to the root system in the trees in the wooded area, he couldn't do it. It was virtually impossible, so we had to leave the remains above the ground.
So after 3 months, you can imagine Florida and the heat, the moisture, it would be almost totally decomposed. It would be a mess.
Detective Harrigan and I, we got with the U.S. Marshals, and they set us up on a red-eye flight from Seattle all the way to Orlando, and we flew and escorted Joseph Roberts all the way back to Orlando, and we had a jail van waiting for us there, and they drove him back up here to the jail, and then it was just at that point waiting for the prosecution to do their job.
Brittany Tavar and her new friend, Joseph Roberts, attend a block party together. The next day, she goes missing.
Now, things start to kick in that something has gone wrong. One dog, no Brittany, no car, no idea what's occurred.
Brittany's new friend, Joe, is tracked driving her vehicle across country.
There was a traffic stop that was conducted in Wyoming on Joseph Roberts, and he said it was his aunt's vehicle that he was in possession.
Detectives see Joseph Roberts entering a store and purchasing a few items with Brittany's card.
What we learned was we did not see Brittany in any of those video transactions.
3 months after Brittany's disappearance, there's a break in the case.
Joseph Roberts is arrested in Seattle for shoplifting at a grocery store.
My partner and I flew to Seattle immediately, and we were provided an interview room and access to him at Seattle Police Department headquarters, where we conducted a several-hour interview with him. During that interview, Joseph confessed to us that he did murder Brittany Tavar based on an altercation they had the morning of this incident.
Brittany had been preparing for a court case, and according to her friend, Brenda Henry, Joseph helped prepare the case for her. He did a lot of work on this computer that she had bought for him. When she woke up and she started reviewing it, she wasn't happy with the information that he had given her.
She was disappointed in his computer work.
According to what Joseph had told us, that he remembers Brittany waking him up and just going off on him.
And it turned into a verbal disagreement, which went physical.
And then the next thing he remembers is standing above her with a hammer with blood everywhere.
He doesn't remember how many times he hit her, but in his statement he says it was too many.
Then he took a moment, because she was still breathing, so he went to the kitchen and grabbed a knife and came back and cut her throat at that time.
He did describe to us how he went about cleaning up the house and disposing of the body. And part of that included sweeping the house with bleach, basically, an intensive cleaning with bleach.
He used 6 trash bags and towels to clean up the evidence of what he had done.
And then he advised us that he attempted to dispose of the body by hiding it in the attic, but he said that he couldn't because rigor mortis had set in. So he put the body in the back of Brittany's vehicle and drove it to a secluded wooded area in town.
He brings the dogs with him because he knows that leaving them behind would attract attention and concern. He drives Brittany's body to the woods off Interstate 95. Joe intends to bury her body, but the tree roots make it impossible. So he just leaves her out in the open and drives her car across the country, where he leaves it in a parking lot of a Seattle library.
So we provided the information that Roberts had given us on the location of Brittany's remains to our team back in St. Johns County.
The human remains are transported to the CA Pound Human Identification Lab at the University of Florida. Brittany Tavar's badly decomposed body is identified through dental records. The cause of death is blunt force trauma. Joseph Roberts is charged with first-degree murder, and he pleads not guilty.
But will Joe get away with murder?
He is held in St. Johns County Jail without bail.
It was just at that point waiting for the prosecution to do their job.
Once we get to the court stages, our state attorney's office or the prosecutors get involved in the case, and they kind of take it from there, so to speak.
Roberts' counsel has numerous discussions and begins to dispute his mental state as they enter a plea of not guilty.
Joe's mental capacity to stand trial is hotly debated, and these conversations drag on.
Joe Roberts, through his confession and his admission to the judge, admits that he has killed Brittany, and he's sorry for his act. It's a plea bargain, which is not common in murder cases, but I think due to the overall circumstances of the multiple jurisdictions, family being spread all over the United States, there's a lot of pieces to this that obviously the prosecuting attorney has control over the plea, not the police.
He was sentenced to 30 years in prison.
He's also sentenced to 5 years for battery in a case that occurred in a county jail.
To do the quick plea brings the beginning of the state of closure, as much closure as can happen with a family. It starts that healing process and closure process. It's an expedient way to do justice when the criminal confesses and takes his punishment accordingly.
Brittany's best friend Brenda now cares for the two dogs. She recognizes that Brittany's big heart and trusting nature are an integral part of who she was, but she wishes people hadn't taken advantage of it.